Hi, everyone. Today, what we're going to do is continue our discussion about the final paper. And today, we're going to break down paragraphs in terms of their function and how to use them to best get your reader through your paper. So, we have a little guest lecturer today, at least for the moment, and we'll get going. So, as you see, basically, what I've done is updated the original discussion we had on the third. So, you can go through that and basically kind of remind yourself of the earlier discussion we had about the paper. And I'll revisit some of that same information today as well. But overall, what I wanted to focus on is paragraph structuring. And we can break this down into two purposes of paragraphs. So basically, the functions of paragraphs, we can say twofold. The first being it provides spaces for the writer to unpack your ideas. So basically, here you're going to be unpacking your ideas to introduce the reader to the topic under examination, to express the goals, kind of the main thesis of the paper to the reader. And then also you can talk about uh, the analysis as well, paragraph by paragraph, kind of breaking it down for the reader, and also kind of conclude the paper for the reader. And so again, this nicely ties into the first discussion we had. The first two pieces, introducing the reader to the topic under examination and expressing the main goals of the paper. You'll find that those ideas in the introduction section. And the body section of your paper is where you perform that analysis. You're providing support for your stated goals. And then the conclusion of the paper, they will be talking about main ideas you want the reader to take away, but also some future directions for analysis when it comes to your issue. So getting into the second kind of function, the second purpose of the paragraph is to guide the reader's attention throughout the paper. So basically, you're kind of showing the reader kind of where to go, what to think about kind of along the way. And you're kind of showing where the introduction is, where the body is, and where the conclusion is. So again, these are both very important functions of paragraphs, providing the key information to the reader and kind of guiding the reader throughout the paper. So what we'll do now is kind of look at each purpose separately and break them down a little bit further. So looking at purpose one, how paragraphs provide spaces for the writer to unpack their ideas. By unpack, simply kind of have something, what I refer to kind of that opening sentence, and you unpack it. Then you have a next paragraph, a new opening sentence, and you unpack it. So here we're looking at how you're going to, again, introduce the reader to the topic under examination. And overall, we can say that, you'll be talking about, what is SI, kind of a little bit of history behind it, what's its main focus. And then also you kind of get into your issue. You're kind of looking at through the SI perspective. So again, I look at it as kind of starting broad and then getting more specific into kind of what you're doing. And then kind of getting to the very specific part of the paragraph is basically when you're explaining the goals to your reader, stating the thesis, putting forth the main goals of the paper to the reader. So again, basically by the time the reader gets done with the introduction paper, the reader should have a good understanding of kind of the background of your analysis, the specific goal of the current analysis, and then kind of the next portions of the paper, you'll continue to pack ideas, but when you're unpacking these new ideas, kind of different purposes behind them. So getting to the providing support. So again, when you provide support for your analysis, when you're supporting your thesis kind of in the body of the paper, you're asking yourself a couple different questions. And so, what does the issue look like when you're viewing it through that symbolic interactionist perspective? And here the question basically is, what are the primary meanings connected to your issue? And then another question that kind of ties into the body of the paper when you're supporting your goals. is, how the issue is understood when you're kind of performing the analysis through that symbolic interactions perspective. So again, kind of how it looks, kind of again, a more general kind of understanding, connecting to the meanings connected to the issue, but how it's understood. So you're kind of getting a little bit deeper in terms of the understanding, and you're asking new questions. What are the meanings embraced, minimized that relate to your issue? How did the meanings emerge? What are potential alternative meanings? How do the meanings change over time? And so here again, these are all questions that kind of get into a deeper understanding of your issue through the symbolic interactions perspective, where kind of earlier in the body of the paper, more generally speaking about how the meanings are kind of connected to your issue in general. So again, you can mess around with some of these questions. You can switch to ordering of them, but more or less, this is what you're doing directly, indirectly in the body of your paper. And the conclusion of the paper has a couple questions. Like we talked about before. What does the reader need to take away? So you want to avoid summarizing what the reader just read, but you do want to maybe reintroduce or highlight ideas that you really think are important that you want the reader to take away in the conclusion part of your paper. Then also, talk about future directions. Maybe some gaps that are still there in your analysis that you didn't get to talk about, or what do you expect with your issue in the future? What will it look like? How will it change? How will it evolve? And then perhaps talk about future research and that could be conducted as well. So those are looking at kind of the first part in terms of the paragraph's purposes, unpacking your ideas. So again, every paragraph kind of provides you an opportunity to kind of explain what you're doing, whether it be the introduction part, the body where you're supporting your stated goals, and the conclusion. And so the second purpose is basically using the paragraphs to guide the reader's attention. So, these roughly go hand in hand with the first purpose of unpacking your ideas. But overall, when you're using the paragraphs, you should be kind of thinking about how the reader is kind of being guided through the paper. And here, I always kind of refer to the opening sentence of a paragraph being the most important sentence, because just by looking at the opening sentence, the reader should have an understanding of what to expect within that paragraph. And so basically inform the reader about what's being discussed in the paragraph. And here's where you really need to kind of put that in that opening sentence. And the opening sentence, again, should tell the reader kind of what to expect in the following paragraph. And then, after you kind of state the opening sentence, what to expect, what the paragraph's going to be about, then you kind of unpack it further and discuss what you stated in that opening sentence. So here I just provide an example. The opening sentence would be for the paragraph, anti-government militia groups increased with the election of President Obama. And then following this, the reader is expecting to hear more about this. Okay, what's the connection between the election of President Obama and the increase of these militia groups? And that's what we'd be discussing throughout the rest of the paragraph following the opening sentence. So basically, think of that opening sentence as an opportunity to kind of tell the reader what you're going to be doing in that paragraph. And every new paragraph should have a new opening sentence, with the exception of when you're continuing an idea into a following paragraph. And so sometimes you have a lot of information to unpack, and it still relates to kind of that opening sentence topic, but you're getting to the point where the paragraph's getting too long. So you're trying to find a natural kind of split, and you would continue the idea. So rather than using a new opening sentence to introduce a new idea, when you're continuing an idea in a new paragraph, you simply do something like, in addition to, along with. So again, kind of to show the reader that, yes, this is a new paragraph, but we're still continuing the idea we discussed in the previous paragraph. So one thing to avoid is sometimes I see students using kind of an introduction sentence of a paragraph actually to conclude the previous paragraph. So you have, maybe a general discussion about militia groups in the United States. And then at the end of that paragraph, you say anti-government groups increase with Obama being elected. And then next paragraph, that's what you discuss, the connection between the election of Obama and the increase in these groups. Avoid that. You want that sentence at the bottom of the previous paragraph should be the opening sentence for the next paragraph. So kind of keep everything together. All the ideas should match in terms of what you're discussing in the opening sentence and what you're discussing within that paragraph. So overall, the second part here, we can say that the paragraph should be used to inform the reader about the section of the paper they're in. So basically here, you can use the opening sentences to show the reader that you're transitioning from one part of the paper to another. So again, this is very simple, but again, it kind of guides the reader through the paper. These are the ideas you're going to see discussed in the paragraph, and here's where we're transitioning to a new part of the paper. So when you transition from the introduction part of the paper to the analysis to the body, you could say something like, to begin the analysis. Again, something very simple, but again, it kind of takes the attention from the introduction part of the paper away from the reader and turns it to the body of the paper. When you switch from the body of the paper to the conclusion, again, you could say something simply as to conclude. And again, the reader would know, okay, now I'm reading about the conclusion of the paper. The body of the paper is finished. So again, these are all very simple tips, strategies, but when you perform them effectively, it really helps the reader kind of be organized as they go through the paper. And here's kind of the benefit of that is when the reader goes through it coherently, that means you have a coherent paper, that everything's kind of in its proper place. And, the reader's not jumping around trying to figure out what am I reading about? How does this relate to that? And so, when you're effectively kind of doing the unpacking kind of paragraph to paragraph, kind of following these questions in terms of what you're discussing in each paragraph. When you're effectively kind of dividing the paper up into these paragraphs all come together to create the introduction, these paragraphs all come together to create the body, and these come together to create the conclusion. Again, you have order in the paper that creates kind of order in the mind of the reader. And then when you're kind of using those paragraphs not only to kind of create a structured outline, but kind of to structurally guide the reader. Again, when it's coherent within the paper, it'll be coherent in the mind of the individual. So overall, that's what I wanted to do for today, throughout some more tips in terms of, what you're going to be doing and your final paper of the semester and basically how you're going to be approaching it. And, this is something that kind of ties into the writing component of our class. So I want you to kind of not only learn more about your issue, but also how the issue ties into symbolic contractionism, but also, how to maybe walk away from this class being a little bit better of a writer, not only because of the practice you've been doing writing, but taking kind of an understanding of kind of how you approach each piece and using that approach, how you can effectively develop a social product, the paper you're writing, and how that social product being ordered, you can create a psychological order in the reader, and then the reader can get the most out of it. So I'll leave that there for today. And basically, from now on, we'll be focusing on the details of the final paper. I'll be discussing the last reading and the SI works, the Archer piece. But other than that, we're going to be kind of focusing on this. Always feel free to send me drafts of your paper before you initially turn it in. But also after you turn it in the first time, you will have that opportunity to revise it if you choose to do so. So I'll leave that there for today, and I'll see you next time.